can run it.
What's in it?
If you just put your laptop holding the laptop because it's still got
Well,
it.
ours is just doing
It's all
the circle. Oh, they've just got it.
What's the listen? Yeah, that's why I'm looking at.
Can I grab one of these?
Yep, cool.
Backseat mentality. Solomon, because they have a fund.
You going away?
Yeah, I think something like that. Yeah.
Most of the environment.
And it was really quite informative, quite good. And when we got on to the leaders for the representation at three orders or now supposed to be 10 orders or something, but it was and they said how heavily are you involved with it? And I said, well, yes. I said, we've got people each working on strikes and you and that. And they said, well, what about
Get yours out of the way.
I said, well, you were leaders, one or two leaders. Look at us, we're doing the
You've
song.
got to go close to the door.
And I said, made a comment, I didn't mention your name. I said, some of our people in Waiāri said that we though when we mentioned the Waiāri,
It's nothing.
nothing. And they said, how dare they?
Yeah.
You have no right to say that.
Well, if they don't know, then
an issue. And it's a huge issue.
Yeah, definitely. When they don't know.
It's the mic so they can hear everyone across the table. It's alright, just leave it on the table, it's all good. Yeah, so just,
Can we talk to that?
no, it'll pick up the sound.
Yeah, we'll just, we've got is 3 microphones, so they should pick up everyone on the table pretty well. Change a little.
Morning, Bill. Morning, Bill. Morning, James.
James and the apologies.
Yes, James.
Are you going to the 12:30?
And then the two for you, but I think I'll be lucky for that one. Instead I'll miss the other one.
Which day is it
Sorry? James knows that.
Yes.
It's a suitable day.
Kasi tēnā rā tātou. Tā ki rā te oho mauri kia rere, whērā koa I o whatinuku I o whatirei. Tēnā whakaiki kia tū ki te rangi, whānu, ara mai, tū mai te tuki raka hau I e, hui e, tāki e. O tira, ka rere tonu rā ngā whakaro kia rātau, ko wehe atu rā ki te pō. Rātau rā te nui, rātau rā te rahi. E mahana tonu ana te whare nei, mā kuku tonu ana ngā pāpāringa nei. O tira, e here here tonu ana te rā, te pane, ki te kawa mā tōtoru nei. Nō reira, tēnei rā te tuku I a rātau o tira, te pōhiri nei I a koto nā mate. Haria mai. Kia tangihia, kia mihia, ara kia pīkauria, tahitia tātou, tēnā o tātou nā mate. Nō reira, koutou, nuku te ariari mā kia koutou, I haere, o tira, ka huri mai anō kia tātou ki te whai iau ki te ao mārama, ti hei mauri ora. E kore rā e tō roatia rā ngā kōrero hioeno, e tuku nei ngā mihi whakatau I a tātou katoa, I runga I tēnei rangi tāhua, tēnei rangi mokopuna. E harei te mea he wai tapu te nuinga, no reira hoki mai tātou, ara, ki raro I te maru, o tō tātou tupuna o moko tangata o kotahi e tuake rei. O tira ki runga ki te whenua o tūpango, ara, ki te rohe o te takapū o tapu wika. No reira, nau hoki, nau haere, nau piki mai rā tātou katoa. O tira, koutou rā no tauranga moana, haere mai, hoki mai. Toko nui tonu nei, ngā tūpuna e tū nei, tū huri te whare nei, I moe, ki roto I a koutou. O tira, toko nui hoki rātau, I kakari, I whawhai hoki I a koutou no tauranga moana, hioe no, ki tāku nei mōhio, wērā pakanga katoa, ara I oti ki raro I te maru o te tūpuna nei o moko, he paku pakanga I tū anō, ara I oti I te tūpuna nei I a te koata, no reira, ahakoa ngā tuki-tukinga, ka hua, ka tohu, ara, ko tēnei mea ko te whanaungatanga. No reira, he ori te tonu, kia tātau I kone. He huri nei tēnei tēpu. He tuki-tuki, ka moana ngā whakaaro, he tuki-tuki, ka moana ngā whakaaro. Ko te wawataia, ka moana ngā whakaaro, e ora pai ai, e rere tonu ai te Māori o tō tātou awa e tere mai nei a te Waiāri. Koira kei te matua o ngā whakaaro, koira kei te pū o te ngākau, nō reira huri tātou. Ko tira ka huri anō ki a tātou, mai i ngā kuri a whārei ki o tamarākau. Ko tira tātou katoa, huri noa i te Waiāriki, huri noa i ngā rohe-rohenga kei wainginu i a tātou. Ara ngā rohe-rohenga a ngā kaunihera, ara anō ngā rohe-rohenga a ngā iwi. Nō reira, i te mutunga iho, ko tātou katoa, kei te tū, ki runga i te whenua kotahi. Hakoa ngā rohe-rohenga o tēnā o tātou. Kia no, tēnei he whakatauno iho i a tātou, ki runga i te rangi Māori, ki runga i te hu Māori, ki runga i te whakaiti. Nō reira, ara, ngā mate, ka whakairia, ngā whakaaro ki a tātou, ka whakaarahia. Kia no, tātou katoa, huri noa, tēnā koutou, ara, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Ka whakakapia ki tēnei wāhanga ki te karakia, ma ko nā anō hoki e wāwāhi e whakatūwhera hoki ai i ngā whiriwhiri kōrero. Ka tika tonu ngā kōrero ki wainginu i a tātou. Nō reira, he paku karakia tēnā rā tātou. Whakarungo rā e tāne ki te ahurewa, ki te pūkera, ki te wāranga, ki te taurā, ki te tauwira. I tupuko ngā pū, ngā weu, ngā more, ngā rito, ngā take i te ororo. E nei ka whakahua kei ngā mau, ngā tapuko tupua, te rangi ko tawhito te rangi. I whakahau mai te tapu, i te pauri, te mano, o ngā atua. I hohaua mai no i o matua kore. Tēnei ka whakatakina ki runga i o tūpango. Kia māhea te hua mā kihi ki runga ki wēnei tauwira. Kia tū ki te rangi. Whāno, ara mai, tū mai te tokiraka. Haumi e, hui e, tāi ki e. Kia ora tātai.
Tēnā no tātou, tēnā tātou ko huitahi nei. Hara tēnei tū whakaiti, tū whakahihi nei. Ia koutou rā te haukāinga, kia koe rā mokoera. I whakatūwhere hea tēnei o tō tātou nei hui. I whakatau nei hoki rā tātou, ngā mema o tēnei kōmiti. Me ki rei ngā āpiha i ngā kaumahi. Hei hāpai nei ngā ahutangi ngā take e horanga. Nō reira tēnā koe. Huri ake rā, ki te haukāinga, kia koutou rā tapuita. Nā koutou rā I whakamana nei I a tātou. E tautoko rā hoki ngā kōrero, kia rātou kua whetūrangitia. Huri ake rā, kia tātou te hongora tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Me ki rā I ngā kōrero e pāne ki te kaupapa nei, ko te mea matua, huri ake rā, ngā whakaaro ki tō tātou awa, ki tā koutou awa. Hai ara hi nei, I a koutou, hai ara hi nei I a tātou roto I wēnei o ngā āhuatanga. Nō reire, kore e toro ngā kōrero, engari ko te mea nui, whakahoki ara I o kupu kia tātou I tēnei rā nō reira. Kia koutou, kia tātou anō, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Good morning everybody and welcome to the Waiāri Kaitiaki Advisory Group for Wednesday the 7th of June 2023. As we'll follow this normal process, we've been live streamed. And if you do have a mobile device, just make sure it's on silent as we make our way through our agenda this morning. And just want to mihi to mokoera for his whakatau and for karakia this morning. I do have apologies from James, and I know that Bill's got another engagement later on, and I'm pretty sure we would be able to get through the agenda in the next
20 minutes.
in the next hour to probably an hour and a half. So, yeah. So, can I have a mover to that apology from James, John, and Bill, seconding that. All those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Sorry, can we also add Maru Tepsu?
Maru Tapson. Mover and second, okay with that?
Yes, fine.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Okay. In terms of the public forum, I don't have anything on my list in front of me, but I do want, because this is still a formal committee meeting, if there was somebody from the Hokainga that wanted to speak, or I do want to kind of make that available. If anybody from the Hokainga, via sitting up the back there, if anybody wanted to speak about anything related to the take on the table today, I just wanted to make that available before we move through the rest of the agenda. Otherwise, we'll carry on. Okay, come by. Okay, late items. We do have the paper. Sorry, I don't have it in front of me. The dated paper from, the late paper from the update for the advisory group, and intention is to move that first before we move into the other paper on the agenda. So yeah, so can I have a move it that we accept the late paper?
Aye. Second.
So the mover here and the seconder here. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Okay, carry. And then in terms of rearranging the order of business, so bringing this paper forward, can I have a mover that we move this paper to the front end of the agenda? And a seconder? Right. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Okay. We have no confidential business to be transferred into the open. There is no, well, we haven't changed the order of business. And the minutes from the previous meeting. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Can I have a mover and seconder to accept the minutes? Mover, Darlene, and Joelle seconding. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Okay, conflicts of interest. Call for conflicts of interest. Any? Okay, we'll move through to the business. So we'll move to item 9.2, which is a Waiāri Advisory Group update. So that's over to you, I think, Peter.
Although you've received the report, I thought it was pertinent just to give a bit of background and just an update on some of the flow information that we've had. We've had some dramatic rainfall between our last meeting and current, and yeah, just wanted to take you through that's basically the update. So a little bit on the current flow data in the stream, as well as what we are taking from the stream for production purposes. Also a discussion, just a bit of information on the events that we've had and how dramatic those flows have been.
and also an update on that catchment aerial survey. That was sent as a separate report in between meetings. However, it was difficult to put together as a report because of all the photographs. There was a link in there, but I thought it would be useful just to give a snapshot of the findings of that aerial survey. So firstly on the Waiāri stream flow patterns. So the previously we had reported up to July 2023. So this current update is until the end of April. And I just make the point, you know, the actual measurement of flow when we're in those flooding situations is very difficult because it's not really calibrated properly. So I just put the word of caution there in terms of how accurate those flow figures are. They're just indicative at the end of the day. Equally, as a result of that flooding, the biomonitoring survey, which would normally have been conducted in February, was delayed. It has been undertaken, but that report is in draft. We're just busy finalising that, so that'll come to our next Waiāri Kaitiaki Advisory Group meeting. So this is a graph showing the average and minimum stream flows. The blue line is the average and the orange is the minimum for each month. So what you can see there is that stream flows are improving both on an average and minimum basis, but it's very difficult to ascertain what the true baseline is of flow simply because we've had that so much rain. And what we need is a real dry period before we can really re-establish what the true baseline is. But certainly with all the rain that we've had, we hope that all the groundwater supplies are being recharged, and therefore stream flows will improve as a result. Just to also note that as of January, TCC have been recording the flow data, so NIWA no longer record the data. We have that online. There's linkages to that. But equally, we still use NIWA to undertake the flow gauging and the flow calibration. So they come and verify the flows, but we then measure it on a day-to-day basis from a data collection point of view. So this is, if I just go back a second, so that graph, we've taken out the maximum flows simply because otherwise it makes the graph a bit meaningless. I'll show, we've got some further graphs that will show why that is the case. On there you can see the average flow is that blue line, the straight blue line around the 4,000 litres per second. The yellow line just reflects the lowest recorded flow that we've had, and that 1,100 litre per second line, that's what we've deemed as a minimum flow that we would not like to ever get down to. This graph shows that that same purple line is the minimum flow as an indication. The green line is the maximum consented take that is allowed under the consent. So that's 694 litres a second. And the blue line at the bottom is showing what we are actually abstracting from the stream. So very small amounts at this stage. On average, it's been about 60 litres a second that we've been removing. So this graph only shows the period from December to current, because the abstraction started for the wider commissioning mid-December. So some of the flooding events that we've had. This graph just shows a very brief snapshot between the 27th and 29th of January, where we had that very extreme event over the Auckland long weekend. We estimate that the maximum flow was about 428,000 litres a second, so that's 400 times the average flow in the Waiāri stream. The previous maximum flow that I had on record was about 100,000 litres a second in 2022. So the event in January is the highest that we've got on our monitoring records. It's also to note that the rainfall that we've had between July last year and April this year, we've recorded already 2,255 millimetres of rain. So you could say double what we would normally expect for that period of time. So we certainly faced an unprecedented rainfall event this year on the back of 3 particularly dry years. This is a snapshot of between January and current, basically end of May, just showing the extremity of those flood events. So if I can, the very tall peak, that's that January event for during the Auckland long weekend, where I indicated about 428,000 litres a second was recorded. You can see that during February, so Cyclone Gabrielle did not have a significant impact from a rainfall point of view. It was mainly wind that we experienced, and that would have done damage in a different form, but certainly not from a rain point of view. But more recently, on the 9th of May, you can see we've had again a quite significant spike there. So we're experiencing a lot more of these events, and that event on 9th of May was again higher than the one that we recorded previously in 2002. So within the space of a couple of months, we've had 2 very extreme events come down the Waiāri. We've got a video. So this is a video that's about a minute and a quarter long. I thought it was worth showing. It condenses about 45 minutes of time, so it is sped up, but it really gives you a good understanding of the dynamics of what happened on the 9th of May. So this has started at about 4:30 in the afternoon. Let's see if I can get this working. There we go. You can still see some of the silt from a rain event that had happened a few days before. So this is half an hour into it, and now it starts intensifying. This is over 15 minutes that's happened. So it gives you a fairly good understanding of the change that can occur. And this wasn't as extreme as the Auckland long weekend event, where the water level rose about 5 meters. I'm not sure quite what the level was for this one, but certainly you can see how dramatically it comes up. So then moving on to the aerial survey. So that survey was undertaken after the Auckland long weekend event, as well as Cyclone Gabriel. It gave a snapshot of the key visual impacts that
Sorry, Peter, can we just pause there?
Yeah, sure.
Because I think there are a few questions about it.
Yeah, sure.
On the previous slide, so I think John's got a question.
Yeah, I was just interested to know, Peter, in terms of you showed that video of how quickly the water rose. Do you know what the intensity of rainfall, like how many millimetres an hour it was at that time, or not?
I'd have to go back to the records. Sorry? Yeah.
Yeah, but like, do you know whether it was 50 millimetres an hour or 20 millimetres an hour or that sort of, you know?
We'd have to go back to the record, and obviously it depends on the wider catchment.
Yeah.
We
We haven't got rain gauges directly in the Waiāri catchment, but we've got them in the adjacent catchment. We could try and break it down and send it separately.
Are there any other questions before we move into the next part?
Are your instruments similar to NEWA's?
So in fact, where we're gauging is at the weir itself. So it's actually, I would say it's a bit more accurate where we've got it at present, simply because it's a lot more controlled, and the gauging area is a lot more, will be kept free of sediment. That would be my understanding anyway. So we believe we'll get more accurate results from where we're gauging.
Yeah, there was a mention of the recharge of the aquifers. We've discussed before about the intensity of the rain, and because of that it's washing off the whenua off the land instead of soaking through into the aquifers. Do you think that's actually happening?
I believe with the amount of rain that we've had, and we've had quite a lot of rain that isn't highly intensive, so it is soaking. The land is saturated, so you will get infiltration.
Okay.
And therefore, I believe this will pay long-term dividends in terms of ground recharge.
Kia ora.
Any other questions? I do have one question. So, in terms of the May event, you did show the spike there, and the intensity from the Auckland Anniversary Weekend event to, in terms of severity, in terms of the flooding or the time to rise, was that similar? Or?
Yes, it was. In
the Auckland Long Weekend event, it also, we found that it came up and literally dropped within a 45-minute period as well. I think it's an indication of how steep the catchment is. So when it does start running, it runs very swiftly.
I don't know if you can answer this next question, but given, we're able to monitor and understand what the impact of this looks like at the treatment plant, but further downstream, what did that look like from like at the bridge down here, or at the confluence onto the...
So the indication from... So we'll probably touch on that in this next piece, Councillor.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll carry on. Thanks, Peter.
So I guess going on to the aerial survey, so this was a survey that we specifically undertook to try and ascertain what had happened in the catchment post these events. So you've got to understand that it's a wide area. It was a 2-hour survey undertaken, but there's about 75 square kilometres of catchment area. So there would be certain things that wouldn't have necessarily been captured in its entirety, but I think the main features were picked up on. So that separate report was sent out. There were about 80 photos, so there was a separate download, that link, and that's why it was a bit difficult to send out as a consolidated report. I think the highlights of it was, it does just highlight how steep the stream margins are at certain points in the catchment. The land use is primarily kiwi fruit orchards. There is some pasture and for dairy, as well as forestry area, especially towards the top end of the catchment. What was noted, there were about 13 plus slips noted. Some of them smaller, but there were some significant ones. There were some downstream of the intake, but the majority were upstream of the intake. It looked like there were a couple of historical slips that had slipped again, but the majority were in fact new slips. And the report identified a few actions for follow-up that we are jointly working with Regional Council on. So that shows the confluence of the Waiāri and the Kaituna, very low lying. Obviously with all the rain, it's quite inundated with water. But the area, I haven't got the photo of where the wastewater treatment plant is, but that was actually unscathed during that flooding event, so it looked actually really good. The second picture is just our intake works with the 3 slips that had occurred on the opposite bank, but that had happened prior to that Auckland Long Weekend event.
Sorry, yes. In terms of those slips, is that private land, or as opposed to it's not in council ownership?
It's private land.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So we own pretty much just the riparian margin on that side.
Okay.
But the bulk of the land is really just the footprint of where the intake is.
Thank you.
So just looking at the land use practices, you can see the kiwi orchards on the left-hand side, and forestry and paddocks. Those are the prevailing land uses. There was indication of some forestry debris. So the picture on the left is the site of the old intake that used to be used down at the Waiāri. You can see quite an accumulation of wood debris on the right bank, and higher up in the catchment there was some of the stuff that was recorded. So there is quite a bit of forestry debris that is in the catchment. These pictures give some indication of the steepness of the catchment. So it definitely, when it starts running off, there is intensity that will be coming off those slopes. And then just a couple of examples of the slips. So that was what was recorded in that series of photos that were sent out. So slip number 2 and slip number 8. So So there would have been, if you consider 13 of them or more than 13 of them, the amount of silt that would have been deposited would have been quite extreme. And there'll be sort of long-term discharge of silt into the Waiāri as a result of all these slips. So there are the medium to longer term consequences as a result. So it's really just a real quick snapshot of those 80 odd photos that we put together. But happy to take any questions on that.
Any further questions?
You just mentioned consequences of the slips. What would they be?
I think what tends to happen is if we had, again, some further extreme rain events, that will then erode further and take adjacent land with it and keep on seeding silt and debris into the Waiāri. Clearly there would have been some significant trees that would have come down as well, that depending on where they get lodged as well. I know historically I've seen some fairly large trees come down the stream. But that's really just showing the two sides of the challenge that we're dealing with at present.
Just Patai, does the flooding I've seen in report or quoted or somewhere that the sites were originally built to be able to, well, not be impacted so much by flooding? Is that still the case for the intake and the treatment plant?
So from an intake point of view, I think the protection wall that exists has done its job in terms of deflecting any trees coming down the stream. The discussion that we're having is the silt build up on the other side of the wall when the flood comes across. As you could see in that initial video, there's a lot of sediment that gets built up. So we are having a discussion with the designers just to say, is there anything that we can do differently? But I think overall from a, we did have some damage post that flood event and quite a big cleanup. But all things considered, given the extent of the flood event, I think we came off very unscathed, and it was credit to the design.
Any other questions? Sorry, just one last one from me. So, in terms of the recorded event in 2022, we don't have any further data prior to then about flow rates, like in these types of events.
The flow rates go back to 2001. That's the record snapshot I've got from 2001 through to current. We can trace all the events that occurred, but nothing as dramatic as what we've seen in the last couple of months.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Okay, can I have a mover that we receive the report, the Waiāri Kaitiaki Advisory Group update May 2023 report. So moved by Bill and seconded by Darlene. All those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Okay, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is item 9.1, Waiāri Kaitiaki Advisory Group, the Cultural Recognition Development Update. So Calvin, over to you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for the opportunity to present this particular paper, and I just wanted to acknowledge the two hui that were held in the working group that put this together. It's a very good document and helped me understand things around cultural recognition considerably better. And so, I thank Sam Hemmer for putting this together for part of the team. part of today was probably to socialise this with a few other parties. People have had a brief opportunity to read the document, but as a CAG, we've not had the opportunity to discuss as a wider group. So I've put some PowerPoint slides here just on each of the initiatives, and through you, Mr. Chair, if you're comfortable, I'd like to just work our way through. For me, it's important that I understand, and I'm sure a number of other people here, the intent of these 6 initiatives, because they are quite detailed, but it will help me in terms of trying to establish, not only from a monetary point of view, but also from a commitment around staff time and involvement in trying to put some of these things together. And while I'm speaking here as a TCC representative, I cannot speak for Bay of Plenty Regional Council or for Western Bay. So there are a couple of things which the report has highlighted which require some urgent discussions in-house between the various teams. But putting that aside, if we could just run through these slides. So obviously the purpose of this report was to provide a bit of a status on where we were with the document, and but also for the opportunity for us as a group to discuss these 6 points or actions. And then in terms of the priority initiatives, I think it's pretty well detailed in here. There are certain initiatives that can happen immediately, and there's others that will need to have some form of business case and a bit of structure put around them. But in essence, they are all important, and I totally accept that you can't necessarily choose one over the other. The hardest task is actually trying to put time and commitment to each one of those, and I think that's what we have to work through as a group and be realistic about what we can achieve. If I look at how we operate, we try to get runs on the board early and pick on some of the easier ones to get going on, and as traction picks up, you get into some of the other projects. So these are the 6 cultural initiatives, and I say each one is very important, and it's nothing new. There's again, I look at that and I can't choose one that is compelling over the. They all sit nicely together, and will tell a very good story. The only one that we've obviously focused on early on, and that's had is Dr. Kepa Morgan involved in, which will continue to be involved in this, is obviously the Māori model application and how that's being developed. It's important that we get an iwi point of view to the Waiāri health of the stream in relation to our reporting that you've just seen here before. So the two go hand in hand. So from that point of view, I think that's something that's well underway. We've talked about restoration for the area, and again there's some actions that can happen across various councils in terms of that. The storytelling one is one I think is a great one, and we're probably all embarrassed if you arrive at the Waiāri now. There's nothing that tells you the cultural significance. Me as a Pākehā find that it would be nice to even have a sign explaining the history. So the river access is another one. I know that's a very dear point, so that's something that needs addressing. And then the regeneration program is also another key one. And then it's around this whole education employment pathway. So again, 6 very good initiatives and topics to talk about. I've got the recommendations up there, but I just will note them, but at the end of the discussion, if we can come back to those recommendations. So in terms of initiatives, the actual model that's been chosen is to have business cases for 3 of those, and 3 can start immediately. So it just gives you a bit of a snapshot where things are at. That's from the group. So looking at the Māori model, there is a design, as a brief and an aim and an objective in there, and a list of items. And I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I noticed one of the things I highlighted was there was a number of constraints pointed out, which have been duly noted, and I also recognise that the interagency approach, so there was a need for us to engage with DOC and to use the spatial planning tool, and I think it's a great idea. So the aim for this one is for us to set up some meetings, one with DOC to further that. We also need to catch up with Kepa Morgan in terms of there is a contract in place, and there is, I just want to make assurance there's a continuation of his employment services carrying forward. We'll put that to bed now. So there are some things we'll get underway straight away on that. There are some issues we'll need to discuss with Regional Council, but obviously within this document there is a desire that there are some monitors appointed to this. So I think, and again I ask around this, while it needs to be with the iwi group plus Regional Council to agree on that, we'd like to be part of that discussion from, and I'm sure Western Baby, it should be a collaborative approach to that. There needs to be a management plan written, and with the expectation of roles across that between iwi and Bay of Plenty Regional Council. So it's another important document that will take some time to put together. And there is a number of outstanding items that need to be completed. And again, meeting with Kepa Morgan, I'm hoping that we sort those out. I'm hoping that the model is fit for purpose and you know, is embraced by people. So again, in cost estimates, I would like to have some further discussions with various people and then be able to put a cost estimate in there. And I would like to think that maybe when we come back again to our next meeting, 6 weeks' time, I've got some numbers that I can put in there. Again, I could have put some in there, but I think that's meaningless because I've not had the discussions with various people, and I want to get it right. So the rest area restoration initiative is another one where.
Sorry, I kind of wonder whether we just pause at each
certainly.
one, and
Yep.
maybe if there are questions or comments about each item, that we kind of progress through each one in turn. Would that be helpful?
That'd be helpful, yeah, definitely.
Okay, so yeah, are there any comments or just from what Calvin's outlined in terms of the approach for this element of the cultural recognition? Any comments or thoughts, ideas, questions?
Would it be possible for maybe Ruben to be joining the discussion on this one, given we've mentioned Regional Council a few times?
Is that okay with you?
Yep, that's fine.
Thank you.
Hold on.
Yeah, I guess the first part is I wasn't aware of these conversations going on until I saw the agenda come out. We have spoken before about the potential for this sort of work through our freshwater planning process over the next 18 months. So more than happy to be part of conversations going forward to try and flesh some of this stuff out and make it work.
That's good. So we'll make sure we set something up in the next couple of weeks to get together on it.
Any other questions on this matter? Okay.
I was just wondering, maybe do we want to bring Sam Himmer to just flesh out some of the issues regarding Dr. Kepa Morgan? Some of the issues he faced, or are you happy to?
Is there issues with Kepa?
Yeah.
Kia ora kora. Tēnā tātou te mana te nei. Well, maybe through the chair, it's just an update. In order for the mode modification to move forward, the reps discussed making sure that the previous mahi that Dr. Kepa has been contracted to do is done and complete, or been sorted before moving forward. That's really where that sits, and just finding out that actually there's still a couple of things for Kepa to be satisfied that things are done from council's perspective. So that's what that means, in terms of where Dr. Kepa's working before we can move on
and I don't think it's going to hold anything up if there's still that commitment, and I've just heard from Calvin from the floor that actually there is commitment to do that, so that kind of
Great. Thank you. And I think it's in that item number 3, complete the outstanding action. Okay, we'll move on to the next one.
So the rest area restoration. So again, the document lists some really good points in here around innovation and say a walkover cycleway, and that allows for children to be able to jump off the bridge into the water, and it makes it separated from the road bridge, which looks a great idea. The area itself could do with a bit of development, and some planting and all sorts of things along those lines. So there's a lot can happen with the area. And again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but I think that there is a definite need to have a co-design plan, and we need to have our iwi representatives involved in that whole area in terms of the bridge design and the rest area, the car park, all those sorts of things. So I think it's a great initiative. I know that Western Bay had that on their radar and had some initial discussions around it, but there's one that needs to be pursued. So again, this becomes a joint one between Western Bay and TCC, and what we need to be able to do there is actually take it from being a discussion stage to actually what can we implement and over what time frame. And so again, that means another meeting that needs to be run. As I said, now we're going to get a series of these meetings, and what I'm going to ask at the end here is, and as Sam has raised with me, is we need to have a working group outside of this, I believe, with some representation. I'm also conscious of the time those people are going to have to put into it too, but I think that's the one question I was going to ask at the end, was around how do we move this forward. Many hands make light work, so we may be able to split the groups up. Essentially, that's what I'll be looking for. So again, this is a very much an easy one to get on the road and get moving, and no real issues. Does anybody want to raise anything around this one?
Any questions on this element?
I mean, it was fair to say that we were approached early on, and Joelle probably won't mind me using questions, why we needed to take the temporary bridge we put in to get access to our construction site. And it was a good question. The bridge was purpose-built. It had a temporary life there. It had, per our resource consent, we had to remove it. But ultimately, we looked at thought, well, it'd be nice if we could have had a footbridge or something from here to one side of the bank to the other. And I think that's what generated the discussion. So while we're looking at a bridge down there's opportunity further up the Waiāri to actually create other walkways across there which open up the area. So just thought I'd raise that point.
Okay, I've got a question from Bill.
Yeah, it's just related to time frames, Kelvin, particularly in terms of anything to do with LTP, and given we're going earlier than everyone else, so it's just making sure that awareness is there if we do need to make any provision in terms of LTP.
Very much so, yeah. I'm conscious that it's been one of those ones we wanted to have this meeting, then sort of raise it for a future one, just to bring both you as commissioners on board with that. In this case, I think a large portion of the capital expenditure, again, we need to meet with Western Bay. I know that they've been looking to put something in the LTP for this, so they've got a little more time, but the meeting will soon work that out.
Okay. Yeah, certainly support the Western Bay. Okay, no, thanks.
Any other questions on this element? Okay, we'll move on to the next one.
Now I want the correct pronunciation. Is it tohu?
Tohu.
Good. So I put some numbers in there, again, just arbitrary numbers. There should be 20,000, 20 in there. But this to me is, and I was going to call on Sam to talk about this one. Sam? Because I wanted to get some justice around this. And again, not being part of those discussions, I think it's important that we hear from someone who was tag team. That's what I see.
Sorry, what do you want me to cover?
Just to expand a little bit on this particular initiative.
Sure. Te tipu nei, ke te miha te koutou. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I also want to acknowledge also that our TCC family, Takawanga, have actually started this document back in 2022. So the work that has been done over the two hui this year has actually been a result of the initiation from our Takawanga whānau. So I want to make sure we acknowledge that, because the 6 initiatives came from that table, and the development stuff and the development discussions and conversations came from tangata whenua. And so that's where the level of detail has come from, but it's also been initiated from the Takawanga. Just in this tohu Māori storytelling interpretation, it has quite a lot of significance for our whānau here, and 2 things come up with that is what information do we give out in terms of what stays with us, tangata whenua, or our iwi and the hapu, and then the other part is it's a wider, we're talking about not just the Waiāri site, we're talking about the entire taonga, the Waiāri. So as you can imagine, that's a bit of work, and where we landed was that one of our members wanted to ensure that we capture the history of the Waiāri and commission some type of a document before we just start patching, here's a little bit of history over here and here's a little bit of history over there. It just made sense to actually go, well, let's focus on the taonga itself. So that's the background. As you can see, there's lots of cultural value installed in all of these initiatives, because that's how tangata whenua wanted to be a part of this process, to make sure that that's stated and that's there. And as you can tell in that first sentence, storytelling is the cultural capital. So if we're going to invest in this, that's where the capital lies. And the tohu Māori part is recognising that tangata whenua are leading that storytelling. Did I answer that? Okay.
Sounds good. Better than I would have explained it. I think one of the things around the key actions, we talk about an app that supports the storytelling. So I naturally thought, you know how you can go, you've got these little symbols, you can click on it, and it gives you on your phone as a storytelling. I thought, well, that's a great idea.
Any questions for both Calvin or for Sam on this? Cool.
Again, funding related. So in terms of understanding the current level of pledge funding, and your suggestion is to use some of that. In the report, Calvin, it talks about then ongoing annual funding through the annual plan. Yes. So I was just interested in what that involved vis-a-vis what potentially could be accommodated through the LTP in terms of the level of commitment required.
Yeah, and again, this one is just like anything else. There's that capital outlay to get something up and running and built, but then there's the ongoing cost, OPEX cost to that. So I think we need to recognise there's going to be an OPEX cost there for anything we do out there. It's around not just ultimately saying that's it and leave it, and where that sits. But I just wanted to raise that.
No, that's fine. But in terms of the capital, that's through, well, either whatever the pledged amount is and or the LTP.
Correct.
I just see that's important in terms of timeframes.
Look, it is. And I mean, at the moment it's recognised that TCC have a dollar value contribution already sitting there that we put aside from the project. And it's really, will come to as another item that where the money could be spent on, but equally we could get going on this particular, and that's probably one of my questions at the end is with that money where we best to spend it now, knowing we've got that money there, but then also what do we need to make sure funding. So.
And probably my final comment on it was, given what may or may not happen in the Three Waters space in terms of getting commitments made and actioned. Why there is,
Yeah.
we have clarity of who's responsible now.
Yeah.
Because that could then involve, well, like potential for time delays and whatever else in terms of whatever the new entities are.
Definitely, because you're bringing a new party into
Yes,
the fold
yeah.
who are meant to be obviously taking over things.
Yeah,
again, so,
yeah. Oh, thank you.
Now, the river access points also probably goes hand in hand with the previous one, but there are some other areas that need to be looked at. So, as I mentioned before, we've done an early map of the Waiāri from going past the Western Bay's wastewater treatment plant right up to TCC's water plant, and had worked out there are only snippets of land that are currently owned by each council, but there's a lot of other land there too, and it was around finding some strategic spots where access can be allowed for the wider community, but also for the local iwi. So that to me is a key exercise. It's not in terms of a big dollar approach to get the initial plans done. It's around, and again, this to me is a long-term activity. It's not a overnight. It's around planning, developing, and that master planning of having everything on one pictorial picture is the way to go. But this to me is quite important, recognising that access to the river is a little restrictive at the moment and needs to be looked at. So it's around working between the parties to see what can be done. So there are, again, some really good key tasks on there, so it's been well laid out. There is obviously quite a bit to happen between TCC and Western Bay on that, and with iwi input. So.
Any comments on this element?
The regeneration program. So this is obviously an environmental enhancement initiatives along the Waiāri, and it's sort of about building footpaths and access ways. So it's probably linking the existing maraes with the with the Waiāri planting. So I mean, I think as we've already heard from Peter this morning, is that we have significant issues with the land in terms of sediment that's due from landslips coming into Waiāri. So what we need to be looking at is how do we best plant it, and what we should be looking at is how they plant it, or how nature was 150 years ago, and drawing on that to actually look at planting up the Waiāri. So there's a really good opportunity there to work again between all four parties, to be honest, around getting that right. I'm also keen that if we look back 150 years, the history would indicate to us things like flax plantings and that, and there was actually industry going on back in those times, just trying to recreate that again in some of those pockets. And I mean, I pointed out we'd taken the European history of the area and put it all together, and I think it was pointed out in the last meeting that there was a lot of local history, that the stories that have not been told. We need to capture that and have that as part of the document that people, general public, can actually see. That's missing. So again, I see this one as a really good one. It's going to require a lot of people and input. It actually needs someone to drive it, and it's not me driving this one, I don't believe. It's someone who's trained in that sort of thing. So that to me is a very important topic, and runs hand in hand with the rest of the things that are going on.
If I could add just to Calvin's quarter there, is that the examples that are sitting in there with the current regional programs, there's enough. You know, there's a few out there, and so it's an opportunity for this group to not have to start from scratch, but actually how can we adopt some type of integration that already exists. So, for example, there's an example. So there's an action there to create a formal alignment with Te Maru, Kaituna. We've discussed that at previous hui, and it's something that actually was agreed that it's just something naturally that should be done. And I think there's a process that could happen for that, because inside that particular project is a lot of gold and a lot of things that can support this project and the regeneration program. initiative that's come from the table. So,
Any thoughts, questions, comments? Bill?
Just wouldn't want to forget about our friends from the regional council in terms of this proposed paper.
I haven't forgotten about Ruben.
Not on mine.
So, I mean, Ruben and I go back many years, but one of the things we both recognise, wetlands is a good example around how we grow wetlands. And so, speaking slightly on behalf of Western Bay, I know that we looked at our wastewater plant and looked at changing our wastewater wetlands into freshwater wetlands and extending them. So there's great opportunity to be able to do something like that, and we've got our resource consent that allows us to go down that track. So there are, and you know, we talk about planting in areas too, and it's around probably the quality of some of the streams that access around the wastewater plant. We know that history has shown that, you know, farm practice has not been good there. So it's around cleaning those rivers. So planting those areas is some really good activities, and that runs right up to Waiāri. So I do think it's again, it's a joint program between all three councils to make this happen. And I know there's a willingness there because there was also some funding that was, you know, was being offered too. So that ticks the right boxes in the room.
Yeah. So and thanks, Phil. I think the wetland creation, riparian management, that's really regional councils stuff that we do all the time.
Expertise.
Yeah. And so, you know, certainly keen to be involved in those. That's just an opportunity for us, I think. As much as anything.
And just, I'd quite, and that's mentioned in Sam's report, in terms of involving others, I presume, such as Trevelyan. So I like that type of thinking.
Probably just a comment from me. I mean, I support and you know, like particularly the alignment with Te Maru Kaitana. The action plan Te Tini Atuna, and I've just did a quick scan through it, but it does talk about subcatchments and the wider Kaituna catchment. So looking at focusing on working with iwi hapu, with landowners, but also identifies partners and identifying potential funding sources to support.
And I just want to comment on this one. I think, again, for the two meetings, they captured a very good understanding of all the constraints, and I highlighted that, which are obviously things that we can focus on straight away to try and overcome. I think that's really good, so I appreciate that. And then the last one, which is again is a very important part of any operation going forward. So from the education and employment pathways, the ability to upskill and train people in the water space. And I think, you know, there's a cultural aspect to this where we obviously have these regular meetings, and having iwi representatives who are trained in water quality, for instance, can only be encouraged. And I know that even in the water reform and the new water entities, there is a definite desire for that to happen. We have to achieve some certain outcomes. So again, I think this scholarship is a great idea. It would be neat if we could, within Tapawika, Waitaha, if we can find some worthy recipients of a scholarship to take them through. It's around, you know, the willingness that they want to do something like that. So this can be developed a lot further. I know that the plan is suggested to be ready for the 24 years, so it gives us a little bit of time. Again, the framework around this is not just here, but it's actually happening around the whole countryside. So there's probably people that we can call on to assist in that process. But yeah, I do think that this is one that we want to push further, and it just needs to be fleshed out before we can come back with a framework around it. And I mean, for me, there's a few other people we need to engage with to make this happen. So, and what I'd like to do though is, as we work our way through this, is involve you know, the group little bit further, just give some more regular updates around it. Some of the key things to this is actually setting a program between now and and the end of the year as to what's going to happen. So there's a bit of feedback and understanding of what needs to occur.
Any questions, comments?
Oh,
Bill?
just in terms of the scholarship proposition,
Yeah.
Kelvin, and certainly, well, TCC established, when was it? 18 months ago, 2 years ago. So I presume you're aware of all those
Yes.
arrangements. That's good. No, I was just making sure the organisation is.
Again, while I see it's TCC here, I also see going forward an important linkage with the other two councils.
Yeah.
It has to be. So it's noted that we're the lead owner, but I would like to think that's shared with the other two councils too, and how we work that out.
I think just to make everybody aware, so TCC have got a kind of formal relationship with Waikato University because we've got capacity issues in planning, and so formally trying to, through scholarships, promote and get people into planning, mainly locally. So there could be an opportunity to align what we're doing,
Yes.
TCC are doing in terms of the demand for planners, but there may be other areas, and this was just the start of some of those gaps, and so that's the initiative that TCC started.
So is that up and running already?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's been going
Probably a year.
Yeah, about a year. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that could have a particular focus if there's demand for other areas that we need to build capability, capacity. Ruben.
So we, Regional Council also has an established scholarship program for water and environmental related study for tungsten within the region. So there are some existing things there too.
Good.
So, I took this straight out of Sam, your report, which I think was good. It highlighted what the next steps were through that in there. So, again, we've talked about most of those points, so it just gives an understanding of the workload. And when you start to break that down, it's a fair bit. There's no denying there's a fair bit of work there. However, so I think the report recommendations speak for themselves. The last one I've added in there is we have to have an agreed proposed funding model that requires each party, as Tauranga City, Western Bay and Regional Council, to seek some form of funding either through their long-term plan process, or they may have some other mechanisms to be able to provide some funding. And we need to get together as a collective group and work our way through that. And then as individuals go out to each of our councillors or commissioners and actually seek that funding. And so all I wanted to do today, and I appreciate that may not be what some people wanted, was to have dollars put in there. I think there's a commitment there. I'm hoping that you understand there's a good commitment there to make this happen. It requires us to get together, so we'll organise that, and then it's a way of figuring out that funding moving forward. And that is really the recommendation I'm putting to the King. I'm happy for any amendments, or if you want to add another suggestion or anything else, I'm happy to listen to that.
Any questions, comments on the recommendations?
I was going to suggest some additions, which may involve some tweaking of that.
Yeah.
Happy if I put that on the table now. That we request a follow-up report on the cultural recognition development initiatives. That includes the costings, the potential funding sources, priorities, and timeframes for implementation.
Yeah.
Because I think that's important, so we have a good understanding of that. So I was going to suggest that as a that could probably replace B and C as a suggestion.
Yes. Yeah, good.
And for that, and when I talk about follow-up report, next meeting, just to keep the
Keep the traction going.
Yes, yeah.
Any other thoughts, comments on Bill's proposed amendment?
Yeah, I agree with what's been said. And if we could have a report the next meeting about progress, how things have been going.
Okay. Any other comments? Kelvin?
So my underlying question, and again, is that we need to have a bit of a working group. So I need to get some people on that working group. Other than we will sort out the council staff involved in that, but just from the CAG's point of view, it would be nice just to have one or two people. I know people are tapped out now, but I think they need to be part of it just so they know what's going on too. So I don't need call for nominations.
It still doesn't work that way.
Any questions, thoughts on that?
I nominate Joel.
Are you talking iwi members part of this group?
Yes, please.
Oh.
Yeah, yes, please. And that's because there's no good us doing an isolated run.
Yeah. And I envisage that in terms of my all of the parties.
So Gerald's one. That's good. But who else?
I think Money's put his hand up.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Can jump in whenever.
Yeah, I'll get something organised.
But just a quick question. I know we've brought up regional council and Western Bay quite a lot. Does Western Bay support all of these initiatives and what's been tabled in terms of Western Bay's involvement?
Certainly, in terms, I haven't discussed, because I only saw this agenda yesterday, to be honest, but I haven't discussed this with any of my colleagues, but certainly it makes a lot of sense to me. I think, one of the things, of the six where you sit down and work out and they break down into smaller parts and, the priorities might move around a little bit within those things, but in general and in principle, yes, we support this.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and I feel for John because he's. But maybe we could ask Chris Napier to come up and because Chris has a little bit of an understanding from Western Bay side. It's yours, Chris.
James wants a reporting.
Tuatahi a ke te mea ki te mano o te tepu nei, kia koe te tiokana nau I whakatau I a mātou, anō hoki te whakatūwhera tō tātou hui I tēnei rangi. Kia kōrua ngā tūru whakahaere o te kōmiti, tēnā kōrua o tēnā tātou katoa. So my apologies probably first to John because I never had the chance to sit down and have a briefing with John about some of the work that we've been involved with in getting to where we are today, but support the kōrero that he's laid on the table, that Western Bay's here and fully committed to the kaupapa of the cultural recognition framework. And I think, reflecting back on the last week that we had about this being the thing that was needed to direct us in how we were able to provide the support that Iwi and Hapu needed in this space is really, for us, something that's been really great to see come out of this mahi that we've been doing. So we've been at for Western Bay, the second of those two hui that we had to develop the framework, and straight after receiving it, staff went away and looked at how are we going to support this mahi. So we broke it down in terms of what things are probably LTP actions, what are some things that might be a district plan process, and what things able to be supported through things that we already do at the moment. So in a similar way, I think, Calvin, to the subsequent week that we had, we were already in that space thinking about those things. So it's good to see that we're thinking the same way, I think, and where we've got. So we've pulled together a team at work to look at these things. It includes our General Manager of Infrastructure, our Deputy CEO, Gary Ellis, where a lot of this stuff sits in the part of our business that he's responsible for. Our CEO is really supportive of what's happening in the space, as well as my boss, who's the GM of our community and strategy team. And I think the idea of a working party is that good next step about, okay, what do we need to do to ensure that these things happen. So I think, like John said, the message is one of support, but for me it's probably just adding to that by saying the wheels are in motion in terms of what do we actually need to do to support the stuff that's happening. So,
sorry, just a question. In terms of your working group, so Jamal, Manu, and I assume it would be yourself kind of leading and coordinating that, and would have input from would have input from the other partners as well.
Yeah. So, Ruben, you're going to nominate someone, or?
No, I'm keen to be involved.
Fantastic. That's right. I'm happy now.
There will be other parts of
yes.
that I might follow in.
Oh, that's fine. That, the more the merrier in terms of that from the teams. Yeah.
I also think probably the alignment with the other initiatives that the region are doing, but also with Western Bay. I think that alignment is really important.
Yeah, there's a tie in there to the Tamana or Kaituna.
And I think just following up on that, it'd be good to have some of that context in terms of the report, so we can actually then see how it together.
Lovely. We've got a way forward.
I'm happy to move.
Okay. Bill's moving. The recommendation, so we're going to remove B and C and conclude. So the recommendation will be to request the follow-up report on cultural recognition development that includes scope of each initiative, costings and funding sources and priorities and timeframes for implementation. I'm going to move it to the recommendations. Do I have a seconder to that? McCoy? Okay. With that, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? And that's us, I think. So thank you, Calvin, for your report.
Good, Calvin.
I just wanted to. Chris, stay.
Okay, we do have
Something that wasn't called aloud. Wasn't put up aloud. Can we go into general business or no? Okay.
Okay, I do have one general business matter that's just been raised, so I'll pass it on to Barry.
Okay. I just want to address a matter that was raised in the report and it's in relation to the water for marae. It's not just Western Bay that should be sitting at the table, it's TCC as well, because although originally it was talked with Western Bay, it's for, I think what's happened is Western Bay have got a new process where our marae are not being charged for water, but they are being charged for the infrastructure and the delivery of those services, and our people just a bit, they need some help trying to understand where we get to.
Three Mr. Chair, so confirm, Darlene, through the letter that I think was sent around July last year, outlined as a result of kōrero that had happened at the tepu, the approach that Western Bay would take to effectively mean that marae wouldn't pay for the water that they consume, and there was a list of those marae, and the approach was outlined, and so the consumption charge, which is one aspect, would be remitted, meant that marae wouldn't have to pay it. The other side of it is the part of the rates that's charged to anybody who receives water to help with the getting of water to whoever's receiving it. It's to help maintain the network, and so that's charged as part of your rate. So there are two separate charges, and it was just the consumption charge that was being remitted, was being taken away from marae. So I understand that having now understood what that means is that there's still some charges that are going to marae for water. That's something that the Tangata Whenua representatives around this table in particular have said is something we want to look at. To the extent that the marae won't be responsible for the water that they receive in any way from a financial point of view. And I guess that's probably something in terms of the working group that, or as discussion going forward, we can talk about. And then I think there was also discussion about extending the approach that's being taken to include marae beyond the list that was provided with that letter. The idea being that the same rationale for doing it for those marae probably applies to all of the
Moana marae
districts. So that's a kōrero for the tepu to have. So I can say that in terms of remitting the consumption charge, that process is underway. We've had, I think, one billing of water since those letters were sent out. So if any marae have received those, then those will be remitted. They don't need to worry about them. It's just a process we're working through to make sure we've got them right, and make sure that the process from the consumption side is dealt with. But that rates issue is an ongoing one that the members want to talk about and will need to come to a decision about, and then bring that back to the council.
Okay. That's only one side of the story though, eh? Because like originally it was actually the tono was for all our marae within Tauranga and Tapuika, or in the Western Bay Council. So we've got one side that have worked, and we're still yet to talk with TCC on how that's going to work for our Tauranga Moana marae. Will it be something addressed through the working party, or?
Sorry, just thinking about this, because I mean, it makes sense, I think, to try and align with what Western Bay and TCC are doing in terms of supply of water to marae. I'm just wondering whether it's because it's broader than just, I know the taki's been raised here, but it seems right that there should be fairness across the whole of Western Bay, but also TCC, given these our overlapping hapu iwi relationships across the whole sub-region. I kind of wonder whether it's a smart growth, potentially, conversation to have at the combined Tangata Whenua Forum, to be directed back to the individual councils to lead on. I know that these things take time, and I'm just conscious that it was raised here a year ago, and we still haven't resolved it. But agree that there does need to be alignment, and it's broader than just what happens for Tapuika, but actually across the whole sub-region. I know Carlo's itching to jump up.
Thank you.
Yeah, just by way of update for TCC, for a while now we've been in a program of work to connect all of the marae within TCC to the infrastructure first and foremost. So
to the wastewater and water supply infrastructure. So I think we've got one marae left to go within our region for that. And we already have a piece of work going with our rating department about how we look at water charges for maraes. Obviously we don't rate maraes at the moment, but the water infrastructure, the two components Chris has talked about, we are charging still at the moment. As I understand it from the rating department, there are some considerations around what needs to go for, well, it depends how it's structured and how it's structured. If it's just a decision not to rate for those services, it will need to go to public consultation, as I understand it at the moment. But we're just testing through that to see where that stands and what that looks like. So we've got a piece of work at the moment that's looking at that across the Waiāri, probably less triggered by this, just still as the natural next step once we actually connected the infrastructure first and foremost.
Okay.
About any other comments?
Well, I think what you've suggested, Shad, in terms of a discussion around the combined tangata whenua forum, and then there can be the input into that from the councils too. Joel?
Yeah, the demand was always for free water, and then you get a letter saying it's going to cost each marae $3.70 something an annual fee. Of course, the 10 marae and the consent, this is around $50,000 that marae just don't have. This is viewed as compensation for the amount of water that's been taken out of our awa, and one way that we can be compensated, which we still see as being peanuts anyway. So I think, you know, it's been a consistent demand of free water, and we haven't quite got there yet. And Western Bay was charged with finding ways to make that happen for us. So I think it's still on the table. We can still get to where tangata whenua see this as compensation.
Or as a benefit in dealing with the mamae. Sure.
Agreed. Now, a lot of what we're here talking about is to address the trauma and the mamae that's been happened to us. And I remember some meetings ago talking about us working together and being told what's going to happen to us, that this happens collectively. And by no means is this one take going to deal with the trauma in full, but it helps to work towards dealing with it and addressing it appropriately.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Any other comments, thoughts before we close the meeting?
Will we have to write a report to Smart Growth, or will council do it?
Well, it's an action. It should be an action here that I'm looking at a takawanga to push that through the combined tangata whenua forum to get alignment across water charging for marae.
Yeah, I'll support that, Joe, Shad, but it won't be simple in terms of the fact that currently TCC and Western Bay have different ways in which they charge for their water in terms of what they allocate to fixed charge and to consumption. So that just adds another complication to it. I'm not suggesting it's in any way can't be dealt with, but I just think we need to be aware that it further complicates it in that aspect.
I think we take the base principle for council to investigate opportunities to provide free water to marae.
Fully accept that. Support.
And then for each, well, if we get a collective alignment to that, and for each council to work through.
And I think in the meantime, Mr. Chair, probably just for Western Bay to look at this issue around charging at the rate side of it and not the consumption side of it, because I think that's to the point that Joel has made, needs to be something that's dealt with, and I don't want that to be potentially not dealt with while we're trying to collectively figure out how we address the issue
Agreed.
across the district.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're at the end of the meeting. So I just want to mihi to everybody. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions today. And it's, I think from my perspective, I mean, great having our staff present on the state of the awa and also the facility and how it's coping in these challenging conditions, I suppose, at the moment. But also the work that Tangata Whenua and our staff have been working through in terms of the cultural recognition. So I just want to acknowledge everybody's contribution and mahi there. And then also to all of our partners sitting around the table. And so I just want to note, I think our next meeting is scheduled for
September, I know.
it'll be in September.
the 6th.
September the 6th, and it'll be back in council. So, nō reira tēnā koutou katoa, tātou kua huitahi nei, ai ata whiriwhiri hia nei rā tātou i ngā hāhuatangi ngā take e pāna ki tēnei awa. Me ki rā kia koutou katoa, tapu i ka waitaha, Ngāti Whakaue, ngā mokopuna tia, koutou, tātou katoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Ka hoatu te rāka ki a koe rā mokoera, kia whakakapi tēnei o tō tātou nei hoe, nō reira, tēnā koe.
Ka te tēnā no rā tātou. Ko te tuki rā ngā kōrero, ko pai te waka hiuta, reira, tēnei katuaki ki te whakakapi aki i tēnei huihuinga o tātou. No reira e mihi tonu ana ki a kōrua, kei ngā tūru tapu o tēnei ranga. E mihi ana, o tira ki tēnā o tātou, ko karapine pine mai, ki raro i te mahanatanga, o moko tangata o hutahi e tua kenei. No reira tēnei ahau ka unuhia taku pōtai o Waitaha. Tēnei ka mauake i taku tiripou a te moko. Hei, e whakakapi i ngā whiriwhiri kōrero i tēnei rā. No reira, e mihi ana ki a tātou katoa. Ko papapau namu haere ngā kōrero ki runga i te tēpu nei rā. No reira, e mihi ana ki a tātou. O tira, kei tēnā kaunihera, kei ngā upoko o tēnā kaunihera, o tira kei ngā ringaringa kei ngā waiwai o tēnā kaunihera. O tira, tātou ngā iwi, e mihi ana. Hoi no, ko ngā mate, ka tukuna. O tira, e kainamu mai ana te wāhanga ki a Matariki, ka rewa ki te pai. No reira, wēnā kaupapa nui, kaupapa mā tōtoru. E whai whakaaro ana ki wēnā āwhutanga katoa. Mo te whakakapinga o tēnei tau, mo te aranga mai o te mātahi o te tau. O tira, ngā kaupapa e pāne ki ngā mate, o tira ki ngā āwhutanga o te tai ao. Ara, ko Waiāri tētehi o wēnā, ara, ko ia e karapine mai ai tātou i tēnei ora, i tēnei rā. Kia no, ko nui ngā kōrero, ko nui ngā paupahu. No reira ka whakakapi ake i konei, ara, ka whakapiti atu tātou, ki tērā whare, whare o te tinana, o te tutua, o te ora. No reira, kia ora mai rā tātou. Unuhia te tapu o wēnei kōrero, unuhia te tapu o wēnei wānanga. Ara tēnei ka whakairi ake ki te tarau ngā rangi nui, ki reira ka tira atu ai, tāgoa mai rā te wā, ka tikina atu no ai wēnā ki te kōrero. Ka hui tahi anō rā. Yo e no, i konei nā, ka whakairi ake, hui, hui te ora, hui te māramatanga, hui tāi ki e. Kia ora.
Kia ora.